Welcome back to MPL Weekly. I'm Becca Scott, this is Seth Manfield and Marshall Sutcliffe, and we're talking you through the Ruby division today. One of these players winning this bracket today is going to get a bye to Day 2 of Mythic Championship 5. Seth, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm great. I'm
Welcome.
happy to be here.
Now, that's a pretty covetous thing to get, right? Because I know you did extremely well in your split in your division last split, and even with the 6-1 record, didn't get that bye. It's tough,
Were you in
right?
the one with Brad? Is that what happened?
That's what happened.
You got
Nelson
right.
exactly
That
what
is so
happened.
brutal.
You got
you
Nelson.
went 6-1 against that field and didn't get the seat. What in the world?
But 6-1 is great. I mean, look
It's
at Ben Stark got
incredible.
6-1, and that was a super good record.
Super hard to get. Like that would have put him in any of the other divisions.
Well, going into the split, I was like, please go 6-1. Please go 6-1 and let me get there. Let me get the bye. And then I was like, yes, I went 6-1. And then I was like, oh, yeah. Brad. Oh, yeah, right.
That is so brutal.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Absolutely, and this one we've done a little differently where each division gets its own week, which means the metagame's completely different each time. So we've already seen what happened with Ben Stark on Mono Blue Tempo against the Esper Control that he was hoping to play that Andre Mancucci is on. Now we're getting ready to see Reid Duke on Orzhov Vampires, which has been very popular as of late, against Rei Sato on Gruul Midrange.
Yeah, we're moving things into the middle here. You know, the decks that we saw in our opener on the upper finals were the extremes. You know, one of them was like very one mana card centric, trying to sort of set up a very specific thing where they have this threat that they can protect. The other's the control deck in the format, you know, the one that wants to go into the long game. Here, we're going to squish things in. Both of these decks live much more in the middle part of the spectrum, though with a nod to aggression. You know, they both, lean towards trying to get your opponent dead.
Yeah.
By the way, Ray won his last, sorry to interrupt you, Ray won his last split as well, right?
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
He won it last split. I believe he was actually playing Gruul.
I think he was.
And it's interesting because both of these players, in fact, there's only one player in the split that has stayed with the same deck they played for the Swiss portion.
And that's Mancucci.
Yeah.
Who still has a chance. He's not out because that was the upper finals, which means you have an opportunity to work your way back to the grand finals of today. For one of these two players, that's going to be it for at least for today's
That's
tournament.
right. Yeah, the winner of this will get to play against Mancucci for the chance to play against Ben in the grand finals, and the loser is done.
And then whoever makes it to the grand finals on the lower portion of the bracket will have to beat Ben twice.
How hard could that be?
Easy, no big deal.
I mean, we're looking at this Gruul deck, and Gruul was probably not something that these players were expecting, and this is a Gruul list that's different than all of the Gruul decks, so it's just, it's a hot take, right, by Ray?
Definitely. This is a what is going on here style deck list. If you're used to looking at deck lists and okay, I see. Oh yeah, you see the patterns, and there's some curveballs in here for sure.
Which we'll talk about. We'll see those deck lists in a moment. But right now we have a little piece walking you through Reid Duke's round robin play.
It was not a great start to the split for Reid Duke. Already falling to Andrea Mancucci on Esper Control, here's the end of Game 1 against Jean-Emmanuel Duprat, who was answering the question, what deck in Standard did nobody know was still in Standard? With Izzet Phoenix. Fortunately, Reid would go on to win that match, but there were plenty of struggles to come, with further defeats against Ben Stark on Mono Red and Lucas Esperberto, who was on banned Scapeshift. Sandwiched between these losses was a critical win against Rei Sato's Grixis Control, but that still left Duke at 2 and 3, needing back-to-back victories, starting with Hall of Famer William Jensen. It's fair to say that Duke was excavating quite diligently. Like, really diligently. With, total diligence. That meant the final match of the round against Mike Sigrist was a win-and-in affair for both players. Here's what happened. In a long and tense Game 1, Duke looked in control on the back of his double diligent excavators, but Esper Control has reset buttons like Kaya's Wrath. Sigrist was down to 7 life, so Duke tried a different combo, the time-honoured Teferi Time Raveler plus a bouncing Oath of Kaya. 2 could play that game though, and Sigrist went up through the gears from 7 to 10 when Basilica Bellhaunt arrived. That was effectively the turning point, the death knell if you will, and the Bellhaunt coupled with repeating Oath of Kai's, that's repeating Oath of Kai's, gave Sigrist the opener. Duke forced a decider when a desperate Commander Dreadhorde couldn't find Sigrist enough blockers to defend against multiple Diligent Excavators. So Game 3. Ashok Dreamrender faced off against Tamiyo Collector of Tales early. Narset, Parter of Veils, joined the Sigrist squad, while Duke found an Ashok Dreamrender of his own. A timely unmoored ego from Sigrist took away Yawgmoth's vile offering, but there was bad news for Sigrist elsewhere in Duke's hand, in the form of Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, and Kethis, the Hidden Hand, wasn't far behind. Sigrist tried to fight back, with heavyweight Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, sending Kethis temporarily from the battlefield, but Duke didn't need it. His library was well on the way to empty, helped by Ashok and Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. Tamiyo found Fibblethip the Lost, and with the 3 best words in Magic, draw a card, Reid Duke was through to the playoffs.
So I chose to play the Kethis deck, and the short answer is it was a case of if you can't beat them, join them. So I really wanted to be the guy who had a good matchup against Kethis. But I tried all my ideas. I wasn't having that much success on the ladder. I was having trouble beating William Jensen. We would play practice games. And in the end, I said, you know what? Why am I resisting it? This deck is clearly very, very good, very well-rounded, and I don't have anything else that I love. So we both decided to register Kethis. I have a short list of about 4 decks that I'm considering, and one of them is just sticking with the Kethis deck that served me pretty well and felt powerful in the Swiss rounds. All 3 of my opponents are capable of playing a wide range of decks. So I'm not necessarily going to count on anything particular happening, but Ben Stark and Andrea Mengucci both had very, very good experiences with the decks that they brought, which were Mono Red and Esper Control, respectively. So I want to at least be prepared for them to bring those same decks again. Rei Sato is a very difficult opponent to have to face in the first round because he has a very wide range of decks that he's able to play at a very high level. So actually earlier today, I just browsed through his recent tournament finishes and what decks he brought to the Mythic Championships, and it's quite diverse. You know, everything from very fast aggro to Grixis Control, which he played in the Swiss rounds, combo decks, things like that. So it's hard to peg him on anything in particular. My guess is that he is not very likely to stick with Grixis because of a definitive weakness to the card Experimental Frenzy, which Ben Stark went 6-1 with in his mono red deck. So if Rei wants to win the split, win the group, which of course we all do, he's going to have to beat Ben Stark 1 or 2 times. So I think he'll be afraid of having to face Experimental Frenzy with Grixis.
Okay, interesting analysis in the metagame from Reid Duke there. What were your thoughts on what he expected and what has happened?
Yeah, he was right. Now, how right he was, like, he said that Rei has a wide range. Did he know that it was this wide of a range? I mean, this is...
He's going to be surprised when Karn or whatever hits the battlefield.
Right.
Sometimes you face off against a matchup where you just cannot prepare for it, so you just have to kind of play in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it seems Orzhov Vampires is a pretty good tool for being ready for a lot of different...
It's a hammer, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, if you look at what Ben brought to the table, that's a scalpel, right? He knew what he wanted to try to beat, and he brought the best tool for it. But when you look at Orzhov Vampires, I mean, it has decent game against everything. It is flexible, especially post-sideboard, and it's a type of thing that you can use to beat anybody.
Players have forgot about the Vampires deck. I mean, we've seen it take down 2 out of the first 3 splits, so it is a very real player despite all of the Kethis hype out there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it maybe suffers a little from having been around for a while and like, oh, people are metagaming. It's still just, you know, one of the best decks in the format easily.
Yeah, all right. Well, Rei Sato with the very interesting Gruul mid-range deck played Grixis, as you heard Reid mention, throughout the week in round robin play. So we have a little dive into seeing how the week went for him.
What's up, party people? Maria here to give you the lowdown on Rei Sato's climb to the top 4 of the Ruby division this week. Last week it was all Kethis combo all the time. This week, move over Big Bad Wolf. We're not on Eldraine yet. It was Big Bad Bolus for Sato, who digitally sleeved up Grixis Control. Rei started the week out on a low note with a loss to fellow top 4 competitor Andrea Mengucci, who was on another flavor of control, Esper. But let's see if he can rally back in this match against Mike Sigrist, who's also on Esper Control. Let's look on in game 2 with Sato up a game, and does this look like a weird hand or what? Well, you've got to risk it for the biscuit. Despite a turn 2 search for his Kanta, Sato bricks on lands for a bit, and it's looking bad. Eventually, he finds land number 3 and is able to slam one of those Legion war bosses he kept, kill Little Teferi, and start applying pressure. But here's where he really seals the deal, deciding to take a duress over a second Nicol Bolas Dragon God with Narset, and it pays off big time, nabbing an Elder Spell from Siggy, and it's all over but the Spark Harvesting. Sato wins it 2-1. Next up, it's Lucas Esper Bear 2 on Bant Scapeshift. Game 1 is nearly over before it begins when Sato rips his main deck Unmoored Ego off the top and names Field of the Dead. Game 2, here's another amazing card versus Bear 2. This one's out of the board, Blood Sun. But it's not enough to stop a late-game Agent of Treachery from Lucas, who steals Rei's Legion War Boss, and it looks like it could be lights out. But top-decking like a boss is the first line of Rei's resume, and here comes Chandra, Awakened Inferno, bringing the fireworks. Sato wins 2-0. Rei sitting at 2-1 heading into this match with Ben Stark, who quickly proves devotions not only for Theros. Ben's been basically running mono red and MPL split play since day 1, and it's paying off. Ben takes the match. We finally found the combo player in the form of William Huey Jensen, who's running Kethis. Let's look at game 2, where Legion Warboss, which has impressed me so much this week, runs away with the game. Check it out. Here's Warboss number 1 coming into play. Then number 2 hits the battlefield, and come on, Rei, you've just got to play the third one. Here's Warboss number 3. Legion Warboss, good for finishing off pesky planeswalkers, good for smashing face. Rei also takes game 3 after he slams an Ashiok, which is absolutely backbreaking for the Kethis deck when it's on the opposing side of the battlefield. Rei's at 3-2 overall, heading into his penultimate match versus Jean-Emmanuel Duprat. Much like the Phoenixes he's running, Duprat raises this Izzet deck from the ashes of Standard Pass to give it a try this week. Game 1 starts off great for Sato, as another card that's really earned its spot in the 60, Unmoored Ego, sends all 4 of Duprat's Arclight Phoenixes into exile. Another excellent card against Izzet Phoenix is Narset, and remember this old move, you play her and you don't minus, letting her passive shut off your opponent's ability to draw extra cards. But the very next turn, Adeliza Cinderwind is a bit of a surprise from Duprat as she flies in to take down Narset with the help of a bolt. If I could sum up this game, I'd call it an epic attrition battle with both players trying to run each other out of threats, which they very nearly do. But eventually, Grixis Control out attritions, and Sato takes the game and the match. Rei actually ends up losing his last match of the week to fellow top 4 competitor Reid Duke, making his final record 4-3, barely squeaking into our top 4 as the 4th seed. And Grixis players everywhere rejoiced.
All right. Just squeaking by there at the end. He actually got into the top 4 on tiebreakers. Mike Sigrist also had a 4-3 record.
Yeah,
which
I
is
noticed that
interesting.
when we saw the standings there. It was like, ugh, so close for Siggy.
Yeah, which means it's a tough division, which is always more interesting play, when it's that close. People really are bringing their best. We have a quote from Rei Sato. He says, I thought Grixis Control would be strong against Kethis Combo and Boros Feather, which are dominating the current meta. For the tournament, I plan to play a specially tuned Gruul aggro deck. Reid is one of the players that I admire the most. Oh, and I'm honored to play against him. That's a really nice quote from Rei Sato there.
Yeah, everybody always says that until Reid just smashes you, and you're like, oh, maybe
Yeah,
that wasn't as cool as I thought.
Yeah, Reid is an excellent player, of course. Now, all of these players are trying to predict the metagame constantly and also not do the thing that is other people might be expecting from them. So how did Rei do on metagame, Seth?
Well, I don't think a lot of us have played with his particular version of the Gruul deck.
Which we're looking at here.
So we're looking at it right now.
What is happening here, Seth? What in the world?
I mean, we see the 4 Llanowar Elves, the Gruul Spellbreakers, but then it's like, okay.
Karn? Like,
seems
this
that-
is the main deck?
This was all for the Kethis combo. It seems to be a very anti-Kethis deck, right?
He does have the Karn, the Great Creator, which I do think that's a nod to trying to beat some of the Mox Ambers from the Kethis deck. But by playing that card, you actually have to also dedicate some sideboard space in the form of some artifacts to be able to go and grab with it. Now, the card I think that he may be the most happy about and that we haven't seen a lot of in the standard format is the 3 copies of Unchained Berserker. Now he's decided to go ahead and split up the 2-drops. I'd be interested to hear his thought process on that, but at the same time, it's really nice to see players willing to go out there and just brew up a deck like this.
Yeah, it's definitely fun for us to see an interesting brew. Here's the sideboard for Rei. Anything that sticks out?
You see some of the Karn targets here, Seth.
Yeah, I mean, some of these aren't going to be good against vampires. Like you see the Graph Digger's Cage and the Sentinel Totem. Rei clearly is targeting Kethis, and so Reid is probably pretty happy that I don't have to play against a Graph Digger's Cage or a Sentinel Totem at all. So I don't think the Karns are really going to be what Rei is looking for here. He's probably going to be leaning on some of these removal spells in the sideboard, cards like Shock, Fry. Reid is playing some white creatures, so we could see that. I think that's the 4th copy of Lava Coil. I expect that card to be a player.
If he makes it into the lower finals with this deck, is Immortal Sun one that would be good in the match against Mengucci after being able to pull that in with Karn?
Absolutely, he would. That's going to be one of the really important cards to see if he can make it there. That's the key.
Dude, there's no way he's gonna make it.
Oh, let's see Reid's deck. Here's Reid's
He has
deck.
Cindervines and Karn in the main deck against this.
Sometimes you look at the
What is going
metagame.
on?
Someone brought a Kethis combo last week, and so this is Reid Duke on Orzhov Vampires, which we all know is a very strong deck. What are some of how does this deck really work? What makes it sing?
I mean, Reid is going to be hoping to get out aggressively, right? He really wants to have at least a couple creatures on the board when he's untapping for his 3rd turn. Then maybe he can play a removal spell or slam. You know, optimally, the nut draw with this deck is to have that Sauron into that champion of Dusk. Because if you don't have the Sauron and you just have the champion, the deck can sometimes look a little bit clunkier.
Slow.
But they always have the Sauron. I've played against it. I know how this works.
Yeah, Sauron's minus ability. It usually seems to be in the opening hand. And here's Reid Duke's sideboard.
So a couple copies of Noxious Grasp. I don't expect Reid to go heavy sideboarding in this matchup. Now, if he does face against Mengucci, we see a lot more cards that might come in. But the Noxious Grasp, there are green creatures out there in Rei's deck, so we might see some of those.
Yeah, Devout Decree can hit red stuff. Yeah, you know, there's probably some wiggle room there, but his baseline strategy looks pretty strong.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. That Devout Decree was maybe for whatever Ben might bring.
We also saw a couple of Rekindling Phoenixes, I believe, in Rei Sato's sideboard, so Devout Decree could be something for those.
There you go.
All right, well, we do have this match ready, so let's see what happens between Reid Duke and Rei Sato.
Okay, Seth, let's get into this. We're going to be sitting along with Reid here on the bottom part of our screen. How's this opener look for the Vampires deck?
You know, this is kind of a marginal opener. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's also, like, it doesn't have the combo we were talking about of Sauron into champion and Reid's on the draw. But Rei, on the other side of the table, Rei is looking fine. He didn't have the turn 1 Llanowar, which would have been optimal, but he's still got a turn 2, 3, and 4 play. So I think that based on the hands, Reid's going to be on the back foot, which is not where you want to be with the Vampires deck.
All right, he plays the Knight of the Ebon Legion to kick things off, passes the turn back to Rei, who has Zerta Goblin. He's going to put the +1/+1 counter on it. So no haste this time, but he's going to send it back to Duke, who does not find an answer. So he's going to have to settle for a Knight of the Ebon Legion and a Sky Marcher Aspirant. A nice triple opener here, but as you mentioned, Seth, there's no big follow-up coming next turn.
Yeah, I mean, Reid has a Baffling End. He could use that to take out the Zerta Goblin, but that means he's not progressing his board. So I think I like just getting those 1-drops in play. Maybe he draws something like a Legion's Landing, which would mean having 3 creatures in play could potentially be quite beneficial. But I expect Rei to kind of preempt that and to just go ahead and get rid of one of the Knights, which is what we're going to see.
Yeah, Domri comes down, and that's going to have Zerta Goblin fight a Knight, but no good attack. There's Champion of Dusk. Boy, I'm telling you, a little Sauron action coming up here wouldn't be the worst, though. It looks okay for him either way, because he does have a Sanctum Seeker for next turn anyway.
Yeah, this is one of those vampire draws where you're like, well, I have to go with this, but it's not something you're overjoyed with.
No. That said, this turn was nice. He got to take out the Planeswalker and the creature on the other side of the battlefield with just 1 card.
It's going to be interesting to see how Reid manages to attack, because Rei is still sitting at 18 life with 3 more spells in hand. on the other side, Reid needs to find a way to actually be able to turn his creatures sideways, because that's going to be able to trigger the Sanctum Seekers.
Yeah, he does have a nice curve going here at the very least as Duke. He can play Sanctum Seeker into Champion of Dusk and just draw a bunch of cards next turn. The Vine Mare could be a source of real annoyance, though, for Reid. It can't be blocked by black creatures, and if Rei finds himself in a situation where he's comfortable turning this around and started attacking, defense for Reid could be really problematic.
Yeah, so does this turn into a race, or does Rei decide to leave these Vine Mares on defense, right? And if it turns into a race, we could see getting the City's Blessing become relevant, because right now Reid's got 8 permanents on the battlefield, he's got a land and a champion in hand, so we know that he's going to be able to start chipping in next turn with at least the Sky Marcher Aspirant.
Rei is going to cast a second copy of Vine Mare, and that signals that he's likely not attacking here.
Yeah, I mean, he could attack. I think this is a close decision. I think based on the hands, it might have been a little bit more beneficial for him to get those 5 points of damage across. So it's interesting. On Reid's side of the board, I like this. Just getting the champion down 4 cards is a lot of cards, and then he's got a way to gain life back with the Sanctum Seeker. So
yeah, and you mentioned the Aspirant's now in the air.
The Aspirant can attack. Now, it's interesting if he's going to be sending the Sanctum Seeker or not, because if he does, he's saying, okay, I'm okay with trading this for a Vine Mare, because he knows that the Vine Mares are virtually unblockable if you're attacking with the Sanctum Seeker. So going back to the point I said earlier, I think Rei, in retrospect, is wishing he had attacked, because then Reid would just be at 5 less life.
He would just have 5 extra damage, yeah. But the draws there from Reid, pretty decent. He hit a Legion Lieutenant in there. He drew Mortify for the turn. He did find a Vicious Conquistador and a couple of lands to go with it, so not super great.
And this is how the Vampires deck turns the table. I think early on it looked like Rei might have been out in front, but all of a sudden more cards in the Vampires player's hand, and then this Karn the Great Creator, it's kind of hard to know what you're actually going to do with it. Like, are you going to grab something out of the sideboard and then... Like, what do you, nothing there is really going to impact the board for 2 mana, so I expect him to play out the Thorn Lieutenant.
He's just going to get the Immortal Sun or something and play out the Lieutenant, and he's going to get Sorcerer's Spyglass.
Yeah, so that's hoping to shut off the Saurons, but on the other side of the table, Reid doesn't need Sauron to win this game, right?
Nor does he have one. Yeah, it's really interesting, because you do see some of the weaknesses to the narrow approach that Rei took. Like, he just spent 6 mana on kind of nothing.
And you know, that was kind of a smart play. I will give him credit for naming the Knight of the Ebon Legion. The pump on that card that was definitely the right name, considering he didn't see the Sauron.
Right. In the meantime, though, you talked about Reid turning the corner after having a little bit of a clunky start, but now he's doing just that. Look at this. He's potentially lining up an attack with all of his available creatures, thanks to Legion Lieutenant pumping them. Worst case is a trade here on the ground with the Champion of Dusk.
This is really snowballed, and there's not really a single card, like a mass removal spell or something, like one spell that Rei can draw to just kind of get rid of these vampires. I think based on the deck list,
he's just done. This
is a favorable matchup for Reid, and like Vampires is one of those decks where you're taking these 55, 60% matchups across the board. Like I think Reid is in a good position here and throughout the top 4, but this is the lower bracket semifinals, so still has a lot more work to do, including has to get another game. But I think this one is in the history books.
You're calling this one in the books. Yeah, I agree with you, Seth. This one looks like it's just about done. Unfortunately for Rei, you can't take turns off against Vampires. They are relentless, and casting a Karn for not a big effect on the board, getting a Spyglass for another marginal effect, as it turns out, is just way too much time to give a powerful deck like Vampires, and he's going to need to get those cards out of the main deck. He went for the Immortal Sun just for
He has that in hand.
Jeez. Oh, jeez.
Oh, yeah.
jeez.
All right. Well,
Seth, look away, Seth. Look away. I don't want you to see this.
Can't watch anymore.
No, that is Sanctum Seeker, and it doesn't even hit the battlefield before Rei Sato says, I'm done with this. We're going to pack him up. Now, this is where things get interesting, though, Seth, because Rei has some serious sideboard surgery he could do here to improve this.
Yep,
Basically, get out those blanks.
Is he going to stick with this Karn the Great Creator package, or is he going to say, you know what, this was for a different matchup. I don't need. I like for sure taking out the Cindervines.
Yeah.
And the Captain Lannery Storm. That's a card that could be good against the control deck. Like I really like that against what Mengucci's trying to do. But it looks like he's keeping. I think he kept the Karns in.
No, they came out.
Oh, they
the
came
Cindervines
out. Okay,
and the
they came.
Karns all
Okay,
came
they
out.
came out.
Yeah.
All right, sure. But he didn't draw the Unchained Berserker. I think if he has a draw of something like Unchained Berserker into Vinemare, having these creatures that can't have Reid has trouble blocking, and he's going to be on the play this game. So that, I think, is what Rei is going to be looking to do. And as expected, well, okay, Reid is taking out some of his creatures. Looks like some Sky Marchers and Sanctum Seekers. Looks like he's prioritizing the Devout Decree and Legion's End rather than Baffling End. And he also has Noxious Grasp. So it's really just a matter of choosing which removal spells he wants to play with.
It's interesting to see. We get a chance to watch Reid, kind of sideboarding on the fly here, right? This isn't the type of deck that you just go, oh, I know what I got my sideboard guide here. Let me just flip to the right page. It's like, what is going on?
Yep.
He didn't even see the Cindervines,
And if there's a player that I think can adapt on the fly, it would be Reid here. I mean, he's been in situations like this for high stakes matches where he's prepared to play against cards that you may not have even. You may be playing on the ladder on Arena and have never seen a Captain Lannery Storm, for instance, right?
Yeah, good example. All right, well, he's got his opener lined up, and we see that Sato's looking at his as well, and it looks like he's got a decent hand with 2 mana, although, a couple of 5s in there, too.
Yep, so this is the type of hand where it looks like he already did take a mulligan.
He did, yeah.
So you have to keep it, and you just have to hope to draw a 3rd land.
I think he could be in pretty good shape. All but 1 card in his hand would be unlocked if he is able to find that 3rd land by turn 3. In the meantime, Reid has one of those hands with a bunch of cheap stuff and a Sauron, so he's kind of looking for a champion or something to really turbo out this draw. In the meantime, he's got to decide if he wants to pay the 2 life here to get one of his 1-drops on the battlefield. He can play a Conquistador or a Legion's Landing.
Yeah.
Or a Sky Marcher Aspirant, and he doesn't need to pay for that. So he's just going to play Plains Sky Marcher Aspirant, go.
And notably, Rei doesn't have any actual removal. He's got the Domri, which can be used for removal, but Reid can just go 1 mana card, 1 mana card, 1 mana card, which is kind of how you're looking to start off the game, especially with one of those being a Legion's Landing. Then on turn 3, potentially Reid can already have a Transformed Landing if one of these creatures isn't taken off the board.
Good news for Sato. He did find land number 3 last turn, so that means that he can play his choice of Domri or the Gruul Spellbreaker here. He even drew Lava Coil for the turn, which he could cast if he chose. So options, and you can't complain as long as you've got options.
Yep, and I think there's arguments to be made for a removal spell, but it looks like Rei is saying, you know what? Attack, go ahead and flip the Legion's Landing. I just want the big creatures because if you attack, I have good blocks.
Reid drew Noxious Grasp off the top of the library and immediately is checking out that Gruul Spellbreaker. When does this have hexproof again? It's on Rei's turn, so...
So I wouldn't be surprised if Reid is able to set up a double removal spell
just go for
situation here, because he really wants to be able to have a clean attack and not have any of his creatures die, which would just be, I mean, it's almost the perfect situation for when you're transforming a Legion's Landing. So I expect him to attack, and then because he's going to get the transformed Legion's Landing into the Adanto, the first fort, that's going to give him that additional mana to be able to cast the Noxious Grasp before blocks.
Of course. Gross, by the way. And it's also, it's like, it's interesting because when you think of Legion's Landing, you think of making extra vampires and giving this kind of long game, but boy, does it turbo out your draws, right? I mean, this is not nice. Everybody says Reid is nice. They were wrong.
And we talked about the Vampires deck in Sauron, but we didn't talk about how many different ways you can the games can play out. Reid didn't actually. He chose not to cast Sauron there. He could have played Sauron, and that would have been a perfectly reasonable play to make, right? To get that card down. But he's actually just found the better line. And I think Rei is now looking, well, wait, now I don't really want to play a removal spell just to get rid of, because he's trading down on mana, right? Reid has invested, he's been tapping his mana every single turn, he's been playing cheap cards, and now if Rei just takes his entire turn to get rid of one of these creatures, that's not really what he's looking for.
Domri with no other creatures on the battlefield. He can double spell this turn, though. Here comes Lava Coil to kill the Sky Marcher Aspirant. But with the combination of Sauron pumping up the team and offering that explosiveness for down the line and failing all else, Adanto the First Fort going off, it's going to be really tough here for Rei to come back. I mean, Nissa, who shakes the world, is one of his more powerful spells, but she's not going to get the job done here all on her own, is she?
You know, it's an interesting decision Reid has, because he could get the Domri off the board. He doesn't know that Rei has that Nissa sitting in hand. Mm-hmm. If he knew that, he might want to deprive the 5th mana from Rei, and the way to do that would be to go ahead and sacrifice one of the vampires, but instead he doesn't know that, so he's gonna say, okay, we're gonna let Nissa come down. Nissa, it looks like it's gonna have an impact, but it's not gonna be enough all by itself.
Okay. Domri's gonna make some mana, which is gonna unlock Nissa, who shakes the world. There she is.
And so if Rei goes ahead and pluses on a Stomping Grounds, that could, he would have the option of also casting the Unchained Berserker or holding that 3/3 back for as a blocker. Now the nice thing about having the Adanto, the First Fort, is going to be if both players are just drawing not high impact cards, Reid already has the ability to churn out the 1/1 vampires every single turn, and because he's got the Sauron, it means that he can go ahead and uptick the Sauron and throw those, like the tokens he's making are essentially a free value at this point because of that flip land.
Right, he can just start chucking around 3 damage here and there. There's Unchained Berserker post-combat and another Sauron drawn here. But Reid has his original copy still clinging to life at 1 loyalty. And as you said, he can kind of use it as like a load up the cannon, fire, right?
Exactly.
It feels like more of a goblin thing, but vampires can do it too.
I suspect that Reid is going to try to figure out a way to get the Nissa off the board as quickly as possible. So that could just mean an attack and wait to see, is Rei willing to throw away this Unchained Berserker for my vampire token, or do I have to, how am I going to maneuver myself in a way to get the Nissa and these creatures off the board? And then he'll have a difficult decision. Reid cannot also play the Sauron and activate it into the First Fort, so he's going to have to choose between those two for this turn.
Yeah, the Vicious Conquistador attack to a Planeswalker seems inevitable, just because it's such a good attack. But the Unchained Berserker has protection from white, which makes things a little bit awkward, as Reid could throw a new vampire at it to get it out of the way, to clear the way. But either way, he wouldn't have enough to kill Nissa through combat.
Great point. Yeah, attacking with the 1/1 token does not really accomplish very much. He might say, you know what, let's get rid of Domri now and deal with Nissa later.
Which a lot of people have died doing.
Yeah, I think this is a close decision from Reid. He's really taking the time to analyze the spot, which I like because it could go in either direction.
It really could, because the other thing to note here is that Stomping Ground has been animated, but if you look, there's only 3 lands left, no cards in hand for Rei Sato. And you got to wonder if I can just chuck a couple of more of these vampire tokens at your lands, right? I mean, Nissa only does so much.
Yeah, I mean, you care about the emblem to some extent, but
okay. That's the one that gets you all the forests.
yeah, you care about being able to search out for the forests rather.
Right.
I guess
Okay.
it's not technically an emblem, maybe, but
But the ultimate.
yeah, the ultimate, I should say. But it looks like I like this play. He's going to plus on the Vicious Conquistador, and I believe he's going to send this at Nissa. Rei doesn't realize that Reid has another copy of Sauron in hand. So he might just be saying, you know what, I want to use my resources to take this Nissa down right now, and that's assuming that Rei decides not to chump block, which I think there's a reasonable chance he just lets Nissa take 3, and that is what we're going to see, it looks like.
That's right. So Nissa falls to 3 loyalty. Now, this does cost Reid a fair bit to do, though, right? I mean, he's got an active Sauron that he kind of has to just get rid of at this point.
It absolutely does. It costs him a lot of his resources if he were to do it. It looks like he's not going to do it.
Interesting.
If he were to do it, it would cost him both of his Saurons, essentially. So he's going to go the other direction.
So he's left up his mana for Adanto the First Fort. But given what we know, that Unchained Berserker can kill this first Sauron at will.
Yeah, and the fact that these lands have vigilance is quite a big deal because it means that we know that these attacks are going to come at Sauron, and Rei is still going to have these lands available to block, and he's still untapping with the same 2 Planeswalkers that were in play the previous turn. So we know what Planeswalkers are capable of doing if left unchecked for multiple turns in Standard.
Zerta Goblin was a draw for Sato. He's going to play that to kick off his turn here.
And does he really want to haste this and start to maybe get aggressive? Now, here's the interesting thing, is that there could be a way for Reid to just try to go to Rei's face and just ignore the Planeswalkers. I mean, it's somewhat unlikely, but a couple upticks from Sauron, that's already 2 Lightning Helixes, right? And then maybe if he draws something like a Sanctum Seeker, it's a possibility.
Right. It's something he should at least consider, even if he ultimately doesn't decide to do it.
Now, he's got this Domri still. I believe it's sitting on 2 loyalty. So
That's correct.
if he wants to, he can fight and kill either of these vampires, but that would mean cashing it in, right? It's gone at that point.
Yep.
And you're not getting the pump on your creatures.
And he makes the most obvious attacks, which are the 2 lands coming at Reid, and then the protection from white, hence unblockable, Unchained Berserker to finish off Sauron.
Yes, I think that he might have wanted to just send the Unchained Berserker at the Sauron.
That's what he did.
Okay,
And the other 2 came
and the other
at
2
Reid.
came. Okay,
Yeah.
that was the right. Exactly, that was the right attack for sure.
Reid's actually got his hands full here. This Nissa who shakes the world has really done a work on this battlefield, turning the lands into creatures, because that was really the only resource Rei had left. He was out of cards in hand and didn't have any creatures on the battlefield.
Exactly. I mean, and you could try to use the Sauron to get rid of the lands, but it's an uphill battle. I mean, I think maybe a few turns earlier, we were like, well, this Nissa is really Rei's last chance. But now the fact that it's still on the battlefield and he's able to continually make a 3/3, or in this case a 4/3 because of the Domri, is quite a big deal. It looks like Reid said, you know what, I've had enough. I really want to get at least one of the Planeswalkers off the board. So I'm just going to go for the Domri and deal with the Nissa, at another time. If Reid's able to find his card advantage card, the Champion of Dusk, and able to maybe string multiple spells together, he still has a chance. And we talked about the Sky Marcher Aspirant in the previous game. Having flying is a really big deal on that card.
And it does currently have flying thanks to the city's blessing. Now Rei has drawn Mare and is deciding what he wants to do with his turn. Reid was not able to leave up Adanto the First Fort this turn. He decided instead to play the Aspirant and the Sauron. So what you see is what you get here. If you're sitting in Rei Sato's seat, Reid has no cards in hand. So he has perfect information, though. I will say that getting Domri off the battlefield did change things pretty significantly. Thanks to that vicious Conquistador sitting there with 4 toughness, it can now block any of the lands, the Zerta Goblin, and even the Unchained Berserker profitably, where with Domri, those all were trades.
Yeah, that's a really great find from Reid, thinking about, all right, I need to have exactly a 4 toughness creature because my opponent has 3 3s, and if I'm able to get the Domri, it makes the attacks pretty difficult here.
Yeah, there really aren't any.
I mean, he can say, all right, I'm willing to let one of my creatures die because I want to get rid of this Sauron.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the play of getting rid of the Domri on Reid's turn.
And then setting up the Conquistador, which is certainly not a card you think of when you think of defense, but here we are.
Now, if you send all the creatures, you guarantee Sauron's going to die, I believe. And
yes, you're right.
You just kill whichever creatures you want to with the Conquistador. It would have been a little bit more interesting if Rei had said, you know what, I want to send 2 creatures at Reid and 3 at Sauron or something. That would have been like a decision point, but I think this is this does make a lot of sense.
So Reid just gets to pick off whatever he'd like. He looks like Stomping Ground land that's attacking is what he wants to kill with the Conquistador. The rest will connect with Sauron and send him packing. Sauron's had enough, no loyalty left. And we need a big top deck if we're sitting in Reid's seat because there is more coming for Rei Sato here. He can play this Vine Mare as well. Wow, I am impressed by Rei having really pieced together an impressive board. I mean, he's down to 1 non-creature land left. He's really utilized Nissa, Who Shakes the World, sort of single-handedly bringing him back into this game, and he's worked his way through both copies of Sauron, and now he has Reid kind of on life support here. He drew a Plains for the turn.
Yep, and Reid's most straightforward answer to the Nissa would have been Noxious Grasp. I believe he did board in multiple copies of Noxious Grasp, but unfortunately, he's not going to have an easy way, it looks like, to get rid of that. So he's now in quite the predicament.
In fact, look at this. He may be looking and saying, how many Saurons do I have left? Can I hit with this a few times and maybe start throwing some vampires? You know, this is starting to get towards desperation mode at this point for Reid Duke.
Yep. I mean, he's prioritizing keeping the Vicious Conquistador on defense. He could have chosen to essentially trade it with the Vine Mare, but I think he's valuing it more than the Vine Mare. Because
it's holding back 4 creatures and probably a 5th if you count the Nissa activating that Stomping Ground.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, if your 1-drop is holding back 5 creatures, probably want to leave it home.
I mean, the Vicious Conquistador, it
wants to get rowdy.
Yeah, it's the most impressive card on Reid's side of the battlefield, but that's not necessarily a good thing.
And is Reid just going to take this? Yeah, he is. He had 23 life, so he can take a hit from a Vine Mare. There's a Gruul Spellbreaker, but critically, you're going to see no haste here so that he can get it to 4/4 so it can attack into the Vicious Conquistador. Now, at least on a temporary sense, Reid can use a double block to make sure that the trade actually happens, but he won't have any defense. Oh, hello, friend, off the top of the library. That is Champion of Dusk.
That was exactly the card. That was the card that Reid wanted.
Boom, 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 boom. 5 cards into hand here for Reid. And he's hit some stuff, too.
He's hit some stuff. It's not like Noxious Grasp would have been the best card he could have drawn, but he's hit, you know, the second copy of Legion's End. Okay, we're getting to a point where Reid, the 1/1s are pretty relevant because Rei primarily is going to have to attack on the ground, so it's going to be tough to actually get through a ton of damage, even though Rei has 6 creatures, maybe a 7th coming in. Mm-hmm. So it looks like it's going to be about this Adanto. We saw Reid make a token with it. He's going to be able to start getting value, which he hadn't really had time to get the value off of the Adanto the first 4, besides it being an additional mana source. So he's going to get some value off of that. he's going to have some additional blockers, and then it's going to be a question of grinding through this Nissa. We might just see Skymarcher Aspirant start to go after Nissa. You don't really want to allow it to ultimate.
So Reid's going to get rid of the Spellbreaker while the getting's good to maintain that scenario that we've been describing before with the 3/4 Conquistador holding back, 5 creatures on the other side of the battlefield.
And he's going to make essentially the same attack as he did the previous turn.
He's chosen to just ignore Nissa at this point.
I think he's thinking, well, once Nissa gets to 7 or 8, I still have the Skymarcher Aspirant, so I can still potentially attack it if I want to, but at the same time, getting Rei down to 7, maybe 5 on the next turn, that 2 damage a turn is really going to add up.
And it has started to add up in a pretty significant way, especially when you see that Rei has drawn another copy of Nissa Who Shakes the World, where he's already down to 1 land anyway.
And this would be a spot where Reid would love a card like Sanctum Seeker. Unfortunately, that's not in his deck. I believe he took some of those or all of those out. So he's doing this the hard way. This is the grind it out.
Oh, yeah.
Reid, chip in for 2, and hang on while the opponent has arguably the most high impact Planeswalker in the format and has just had it in play for so many turns now.
Is anybody shocked that Reid has retreated to a Jund-like strategy here in game number 2?
And as you mentioned it, the second Nissa, because Reid hasn't prioritized getting rid of the 1 Nissa, the second Nissa doesn't actually matter very much. Mm-hmm. And all of these lands are... I'm really liking this Vicious Conquistador has been...
Oh, that's the all-star. In fact, the one that he just drew is going to be insanely jealous of the 3/4 Vicious Conquistador. Clearly superior.
And Reid he might have a lethal attack next turn. It's possible that he just goes, all right, 2 damage again, brings Rei down to 5, then he plays out this Vicious Conquistador and a Legion's End, and he might just be able to go wider than Nissa and just win.
Yeah, a couple of triggers from a Conquistador, 2 damage in the air. That's 4 right there. He only needs to get in for a few more. And remember, he's going to get the attack this turn also. So, yeah, I could see that easily.
He might even be considering an attack with the Knight of the Ebon Legion. Reid is someone that wants to get every little edge that he possibly can. So if he feels like...
He actually has 3 activations if he plays his land here.
He might feel like, all right, I can start actually attacking with more creatures.
He's still at a relatively safe 13 life as well. Oh, yeah. He's getting rowdy now.
He is really going to turn the corner. And the Vicious Conquistador, which has been on defense for so long...
Finally gets in the game.
Let's get him in there.
So that's automatically 1. Then 2 in the air is going to hit for sure. So that's 3 putting him down to 4, which means that Sato must block both the Champion and the Knight of the Ebon Legion in order to survive. He also must block at least 1 of the Conquistador plus a token. So it actually does force Sato to throw away a decent part of his board, either trading or even chumping in some cases. So
yeah, expect some double blocks here.
Oh yeah, lots of them.
For sure, but at the same time, if you're losing your lands, then all of a sudden your spells aren't actually doing much. So the fact that Rei isn't obviously ahead in this game and he's losing his lands is going to be a real problem.
Yeah, he's going to lose a mountain here. I think Reid will let him keep the Zerta Goblin. That's a decision he's making right here. And then there's going to be a trade for the Vine Mare, and that was actually a chump block with the Berserker on the Knight of the Ebon Legion. And Vicious Conquistador plus Legion's Landing is the follow-up. Wow, I got to tell you, Reid looked very ahead, then looked like it maybe had slipped away from him there with Nissa, and then his good friend, the Champion of Dusk, showed up, and he hasn't looked back since. And look at that, there's the good game from Sato, and that is Reid Duke winning his lower division there, 2-0. He knocks Rei Sato out with that and moves on to play against Menguchi.
And that was very impressive. I think Reid is one of the best players with combat math. That is the exact type of board situation that goes on for a few turns that Reid is able to really take advantage of his skill set, and we saw it.
Absolutely. It's great to watch him decide exactly which attack is going to go where and how much thought goes into it. We do have an interview with Reid Duke after this win with Paul Gian.
All right, I am here with the winner of the lower division semifinals, Reid Duke, defeating Rei Sato with Orzhov Vampires. How's it going, Reid?
Hey, it's going good. I guess so far so good.
So big question. You know, I think kind of the narrative of last week's MPL Weekly was just the overwhelming dominance of the Kethis deck, and you actually had success with the deck and made it into the top 4. What kind of made you choose to switch to Vampires?
Well, I'll say for starters that going with Kethis again was a really strong consideration for me. I sort of had like a short list of decks that I was choosing between, and Vampires was one and Kethis was one. In the end, I think that the Kethis deck is excellent, and it's robust enough that it can beat basically any of the hate cards, the sideboard cards that people are bringing to beat you, and it doesn't really have any unwinnable matchups. But it is a 4-color deck with kind of a sloppy mana base, and you have to hit your right pieces and stuff. So the fail rate seems a bit inherent in the deck. Vampires is sort of like the contrast of that, just very, very smooth, 2-color aggressive deck. Almost every card costs 1 and 2 mana. So those are like the different appeals of the two. And right up till the last minute, I wasn't sure which one I was going to pick, but I do like both decks quite a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, you had a pretty close game too there going up against Rei. I mean, at one point it looked like he was pretty firmly in the lead with all those planeswalkers in play, and I mean, you had to fight through all of those things. I mean, what was going through your mind when you know all you had was that Sky Marcher aspirant that was chipping in for 2 a turn?
Boy, well, it was a precarious situation because he had basically an unlimited number of 3/3 creatures, and I had that 1 3/4 Vicious Conquistador that was just holding the fort. But if he ever drew a removal spell or a bigger creature, another planeswalker, a flyer, anything like that, I was going to be in really, really serious trouble. But thankfully, I was fortunate enough to draw the Champion of Dusk before he found anything to really, put me away. And Champion of Dusk is just so powerful. It's one of the major appeals of the Vampire deck, and just having that like get out of jail free card in a sticky situation like that is huge.
In a previous interview, I was speaking with Ben Stark, and he was talking about, when he was preparing for the top 4, he really mostly just focused on the first opponent that he knew he was going to play against. So he really focused on Andrea Mengucci and what he could possibly bring. Now, is that kind of what went through your mind, or did you kind of have to try to bring a deck that would be good that would try to be able to have a good matchup against the entire field, because you just kind of, since you're in the lower bracket, you have to fight through everybody?
I would say certainly the latter. The goal for all 4 of us who are playing today is to get first place, right? There's no prize for second. It's you're trying to win your division to get the nice seeding in the Mythic Championship 5. So you should choose your deck with that goal in mind. So for me, as a lower bracket person, I knew I would have to beat every single player in the top 4 if I was going to achieve my goal of getting first place. So I was very much trying to choose something well-rounded and gearing to play against Andrea and Ben as well.
And you are actually going to be playing Andrea Mengucci in the next round. What are your thoughts on the Vampires versus Esper Control matchup?
Boy, it's going to be really close, and things shook out in a fascinating way. I think Andrea was trying to prepare for Ben to use his mono red deck again. So in some ways, with me playing a different aggressive deck, that in some ways helped me, in some ways hurt me. So for example, he has 4 Basilica Bellhaunts, which of course one of the best cards against mono red, very, very good against Vampires too. But that came at the expense of Kaya's Wrath. So I think there are some particular card choices that are going to make this a really, really interesting matchup. But, I never count Andrea out, and I'm sure it's going to be quite close regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Andrea did not sound very happy when he found out that Ben was on mono blue instead of mono red, because, he was packing his deck full of life gain effects, and it looks like, slightly different aggressive decks were brought to the top 4 of this event.
Yeah.
All right, Reid. Well, you have a lot more matches to play, so best of luck in your next round against Andrea Mengucci.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, congratulations to Reid moving to the lower finals. I like how he called the Champion of Dusk the get out of jail free card there.
Yeah, he put that card in his deck, right? It's not like it's always, I don't know.
And 4 of them, right?
That was him being nice, I think, but yeah.
It is the perfect card draw when you're in that situation when you're definitely down on card advantage.
And it certainly was get out of jail free. He was in a pretty bad position and then that flipped.
I like easy mode where I don't have to hard cast my my champions at all, but Reid is fine with playing on hard mode. He's, you know what, I'll wait till turn 8 or whatever, and I'll draw my 5 cards, and that'll be enough.
Right, he had 2 Saurons earlier, where it was Champion of Dusk when it would have been the cheaper cast. All right, well, we're going to do something fun, which is take a look at some of the cards that have already been previewed and just give our takes on some of the cards for Throne of Eldraine.
Ooh.
So.
Ooh, what do we have here?
Yeah. Ooh, a 4-drop there with Outlaw's Merriment, an enchantment that allows you to choose at random. Gentlemen, how does random work?
So, I mean, this is a card that you're getting a creature no matter what every single turn, but it's going to be a random which creature you're getting, so you're getting something, but...
I need a 3-sided dice.
Yeah, I see enchantment removal coming to counter that one. The Royal Scions, colorless, a blue and a red for a legendary planeswalker. You can get a lot of that card draw, discard a card for the plus. What's the ultimate here? Draw 4 cards, and these Royal Scions deal damage to any target equal to the number of cards in your hand.
So minimum 4, yeah, that's nice.
But as an ultimate, it seems, makes sense for just a 3-drop planeswalker, right?
And it goes perfectly with the colors that it's in. Is a deck that typically likes looting effects, putting cards in the graveyard, churning through your deck at a rapid pace, so this is really...
Also, that's 5 loyalty when it enters on 3 mana, and you plus it's at 6?
It's a lot of loyalty.
That is a lot of loyalty, wow.
Good point. And then Harmonious Archon, 4 colorless, a white and a white, and a flying creature. All non-Archon creatures have a base power and toughness of 3/3, and when it enters, creates 2 1/1 white human tokens.
Or does it?
So those tokens would be 3/3?
Yeah.
That sounds right to me.
Interesting.
Are those antlers?
Those are the ultimate of all antlers.
Interesting. Wow, triple mythics here too. That card is a bomb. You get 2 3/3s and then it... Wow, these are all...
How's that card going to be in terms of limited rankings?
Yeah, first pick. That's
Definitely first pick. All right, so here we've got 3 more cards. The Murderous Rider, colorless black for... Ooh, this is one of those fun new adventure cards. So it also has buried within the creature card an instant there with Swift End, a colorless black and a black. Destroy target creature or planeswalker, you lose 2 life. Then that card is exiled, doing his little murderous ride, and can come back from exile as a zombie knight on the board with lifelink.
2/3 lifelinker. When it dies, it goes on the bottom of this library. That's a little weird.
I think this is going to end up being one of the most played cards in the set, in Standard. The adventure cards stand out to me as really interested to see how they work, but they seem like they're going to be high impact because not only do you get the first card, which normally I would guess you're going to cast the Swift End first, get something off the battlefield, and then all of a sudden, all right, whenever I want, I'll just put a 2/3 lifelink on the battlefield. Also, for basically 0 cost because I already cast a card with this Murderous Rider.
I believe that's how the adventures work. You have to cast the instant or sorcery type spell, the adventure spell, before you're able to cast it as a creature. That's my understanding. Questing Beast, 2 colorless green and green for a legendary creature beast. Vigilance, Death Touch, Haste. Not too bad, not too bad. Oh, this is one that I'm going to need a little help. It says combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. That means just no blocking.
No, they can block, but there's some type of effects in the game that will say this damage gets prevented. That can't happen.
Yeah, you can't play a card like Fog to...
Root Snare?
Root Snare, exactly.
That's it,
yeah.
exactly.
Okay, got it. Hey,
take that, Root Snare.
I mean, naming cards.
I
See how
liked
I've grown.
it.
Okay.
Also, this thing has it has 4 different blocks, including Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste as one of them as far as rules text goes.
Yeah, I was...
Limited was first pick.
Yes, you have... What is it? What else does it do? Whenever it deals combat damage to
I was reading the card. I was reading the card and it was like, all right, it's a 4-mana 4/4, and it has this, and it has this, and it has this, and it has this, and none of them were negative abilities.
It also
They're
steals-
all good things.
I'm waiting
Yeah.
for cumulative upkeep, at the bottom.
And you were reading that, but we didn't say it out loud. Questing Beast deals combat damage to an opponent. When it does, it deals that much damage to a planeswalker that player controls. So it's kind of like
Wow.
just going over creatures' heads to deal multiple types of damage. Interesting.
Okay.
Robber of the Rich, colorless and a red for a human archer rogue creature with reach and haste. When it attacks, if defending player has more cards in hand than you, exile the top card of their library. During any turn you attacked with a rogue, you may cast that card and spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast. Oh,
Nice.
okay.
It has reach. Okay.
Casting other people's cards is always fun.
Yeah, the reach is a little bit odd, but I think it's a really sweet card. It's going to go into mono red aggressive decks. It reminds me a lot of Thief of Sanity. We've seen that card. Just being able to cast cards off the opponent's deck is a pretty absurd effect.
Yeah. Is reach, yeah, that's not
It
typically.
has reach
that's-
because it's an archer.
Right, it makes
Right,
sense
it can shoot things out of the-
flavor-wise.
Right.
It's not
Archer.
typical that a red card would have
That's right.
reach,
It
right?
has happened before, but it's not typical.
Especially at 2 mana. There's a very
Right.
small category of
Yeah.
creatures.
When I read a card
powerful.
like that, I see Mythic Rare, and I'm like, okay, they just, they're like, we're going to do something with this
Yeah.
for reasons, and,
Yeah.
they kind of, they get a little more free reign.
Okay, so we have a very, very special announcement coming up. That is to find out who is in the class of 2019, the inductees to the Hall of Fame. That's after a short break, so stay tuned.